feminism thrown in their face, but it also struck a chord with some readers who loved the idea of seeing more prominent female characters. It really depended on the viewpoints of those individuals, their life experiences, and what it was that they were looking for in comic books. But the overall goal of this particular story more or less highlights the case that Thundra is using a bit of deception. This is kind of the crazy thing, because this story is given to us largely in a third-person monologue. That is to say, someone who is effectively telling us everything that's experiences, their own actions, their own investigations, and their own efforts and so on, that men can do. Men who were now being educated separate from women. You had women who were now engaging in exercise activities and political politics that were outside, or at least beyond the scope of the ability for men to affect. And so because of this, it started to create this massive rift, and this is done because of the fact that the Hulk is largely considered to have been the strongest being that ever lived, because again, his strength was limitless. There was no limit to how strong he could get. And so while Thundra fights against him, and while he is able to she essentially says that, hey, look, this basic conflict comes to an end once Hulk just how capable he is. She says, hey, look, I'm not here to really harm you. I'm here because I need to find someone who's equal to me. I basically need to find a man. I need to find a man that's on par with me that can allow the human race to continue. And so what she does is she actually embraces the Incredible Hulk and she kisses him. Now, of course, we know that kissing does not, well, I guess it does kind of lead to procreation, but in the context of simply just kissing someone, kissing doesn't produce children. Instead, what we learn is that when Thundra had kissed the Incredible Hulk, she had actually taken cells from the inside of his cheek. She had traveled back to her home dimension, and he had effectively used these cells to impregnate her, to basically use vitro fertilization in order to make her pregnant, the first woman to actually become pregnant in about 20 years. And so following this, what had happened was she had given birth to a daughter, and because Thundra realized that she was basically growing old, a time would come when she would no longer be able to remain the leader of these women in this, new United States of America that was now the United Sisterhood Republic, I think it was, because of the fact that they were waging a war against men, that someone would have to take up her mantle. Someone would have to be equal to her in strength and be able to continue her efforts. And so the daughter that she gave birth to was essentially Lyra. And Lyra is a combination of the strength that Thundra has, as well as the Incredible Hulk, which meant that she was now capable of being just as strong as her mother, if not a little bit stronger, carry on the efforts of this war, and eventually lead towards destroying the entirety of men on the face of the planet Earth. But with that being said, guys, this is kind of a weird story. This is a gender war story. That's really all it is. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained and you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like and hit the subscribe button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, let me know down in the comments section. And yeah, I'll catch you all later. Peace. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel. So within Marvel Comics, the X-Men have really split the Marvel Comics community for a couple reasons. The first is that for all the new folks who are out there, all the people who are just kind of stumbling across this video for the first time and you're looking to get into Marvel, a lot of you guys may find yourselves interested in the X-Men because it's new and it's fresh. I mean, it's all new, all different Marvel. It's a different take on a lot of the things that we've seen. But that very difference, or the concept of that new thing is really what drives a wedge between the old and the new thing. In the sense of the old fans sit down and say, well, this is nothing like the X-Men I've been reading for the last, 20, 30 years, or however long they've been reading comic books, and they're not really welcoming to this new thing because it feels like a lot of the old stuff that they knew is being thrown away. And so, in a lot of ways, what Marvel Comics fans are feeling right now is the way a lot of DC fans felt with the New 52. When the New 52 was launched, they felt like a lot of their old stuff was being thrown away. The great thing about Cullen Bunn as a writer is, while he is crazy as hell, he does a very good job, and routinely does a very good job, of crafting his own sort of new story, while also paying homage to a lot of the history behind the characters that he's writing about. And we'll see a lot of this over the course of this video, but Civil War II X-Men is not so much a standalone thing as it is an amalgamation of different things. That is to say, it's basically a combination of Uncanny X-Men and Extraordinary X-Men. Now, of course, this initially picks up with this sort of 99% versus the 1% kind of situation. Not that Cullen Bunn's really trying to draw political lines, but in the sense that he's showing us how things are unfolding. Because again, for those of you guys who haven't seen my video on Death of X, which you'll find in the description, that was more or less Marvel coming back, which I kind of felt like that was a story they should have written at the beginning of All New, All Different Marvel. But that was Marvel coming back and saying, hey, here's why the Inhumans and the X-Men are at odds. The Terrigen Mist, as it had been unleashed on Earth by Black Bolt of the Inhumans, has somehow mutated or evolved to the point that it's actually killing mutants as opposed to leaving them unharmed while waking up Inhumans. And so because of this, mutants very much look at the Inhuman community as a threat of sorts. But not all mutants are that way. When All New, All Different Marvel kicked off, we had Extraordinary X-Men, which was led by Storm, and it was basically her saying, okay, look, the mutant community is in mortal jeopardy. Like, mutants are being killed off by the Terrigen Mist. Our goal should be to provide a safe haven for those mutants who want to survive and, don't want to die, which is pretty much every mutant that they come across. But they also moved the Xavier Institute to Limbo, the dimension of magic of Ilyana Rasputin, where she's at her most powerful, where she, controls all these demonic forces and so on. But on the other side of the equation, we had Uncanny X-Men, which was led by Magneto. And this is why I say that Cullen Bunn very much draws on a lot of the old things. And so with this sort of the 99% versus the 1%, we basically have the Terrigen Mist, which is heading over a particular city, and a lot of the wealthy elite mutants that are within this city have effectively taken refuge in a bunker that's sort of made inside of a skyscraper, which basically means that the entire premises is sealed off from the effects of the Terrigen Mist, meaning the mist will basically roll over the city. It'll kill anyone that couldn't get into this bunker, but it'll protect these extremely wealthy individuals. In response to this, Magneto basically breaks in, smashes the place down, and says, look, you forgot a whole bunch of these mutants over here. Now, this is really Cullen Bunn showing us where Magneto stands right now, and that's one of the coolest things about his writing here, is Magneto's a fan favorite, right? When it comes to the X-Men, people sit down and they're like, I know who Magneto is. I love Magneto's character. He was really, really cool, in the movies and everything, especially with Michael Fassbender playing him so well. But in terms of the history of Marvel Comics, Magneto is really like the original bad guy, when it came to the X-Men. He was the original first major villain they ever fought, and it had a great, big, huge, and amazing legacy with regards to how he's evolved over the course of the X-Men's history. But in the early days, it was really more akin to Magneto trying to conquer the world and turn it into a haven for mutants, with humans being subservient, as opposed to him trying to create this equal playing field. That was really more of Xavier's line, in the sense that he wanted, a cohabitation between humans and mutants, this sort of utopia with regards to these different races coexisting on a planet peacefully. And so because of this, because of these different dichotomies, because Magneto was really designed to be this sort of Malcolm X, type of character, and Charles Xavier was designed to be this Martin Luther King kind of character, with both individuals fighting for the rights of mutant kind, it allowed Magneto to evolve and to change. The difference here is that in All New, All Different Marvel, instead of being this very dark and this very gritty person that we've seen in the past, instead, over the course of his time, especially in the Magneto solo series, he was more or less turning over a new leaf, in the sense that he was forcing humanity to view mutants as equal, or as better than them is not working here. So let's go ahead and change the game a bit, and let's just try to find a way to keep mutants alive and to keep mutants safe. What happened was Marvel basically rolled this over into All New, All Different Marvel, and they said, okay, Uncanny X-Men, as it's being ran by Magneto, is not like the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants in the sense that they're villains, but it is like the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants in the sense that it's basically Magneto saying, we need to keep mutants protected, and it doesn't matter how we do it. And so really, in Marvel Comics, Cyclops had kind of taken over the traditional Magneto role of being this really dark force, this guy who was like, we'll kill humans if we have to, it doesn't matter, whereas Magneto sort of walked away from that extreme viewpoint. But the fact remains here that in the midst of, Magneto stepping in and saying, hey, look, you can't let these mutants die, we suddenly find out that a lot of the servants that are within this compound are also Sentinels. Now, this again is part of the much larger project that was going on with Marvel Comics that I think was leading into Apocalypse Wars, which was not the best story ever told. I usually love Jeff Lemire's writing, but I kind of felt like Apocalypse Wars just didn't really do it for me. But at the very least, it gave us a pretty interesting scenario with the villain Apocalypse, who's always been a fan favorite in the X-Men line of comics. But, with regards to these Sentinels, it's really just an instance where the Sentinels are just trying to kill off mutants. Now, once they make their escape, we also find that the Uncanny X-Men are met by the arrival of Storm's Extraordinary X-Men. Now, a couple things to take note of here when it comes to these two particular teams is that things aren't exactly the way they've always been, in the sense that prior to Secret Wars, Brian Michael Bendis introduced all new X-Men, which was basically Brian Michael Bendis grabbing the original X-Men when they were younger, bringing them into the present day in an effort to basically create a storyline where the younger Cyclops would meet his older self and bring the older Cyclops back to reality and away from his extremist viewpoints. Cyclops. Ultimately, it didn't work, and of course, it really just led into the death of Cyclops, like we covered in the Death of X series. But the very notion here, the very basis behind this, is to really just give us these two, diametrically opposing views, in the sense that when Storm and Magneto begin conversing with one another, after this short little scuffle between these different guys, it's really just a scenario where, the two of them sit down and they have this sort of face-to-face. And Magneto says, look, the Terrigen Mists are life for the Inhumans. It's the only way the Inhumans can prosper. At this point, it's not possible to put the genie back in the bottle, right? I mean, they can't take the Terrigen Mist, condense them back down into shards of crystals, and then just allow people to become Inhumans in New Attilan. It doesn't work that way anymore. At this point, the shards are destroyed, and the Inhumans really don't even know how to reassemble them anyway, because Terrigenesis was a Kree invention. It was not an Inhuman invention. They basically just learned how to harness the crystals, but it didn't really know how to assemble them or remake them. And so the result is that all they can really do is just allow the Terrigen Mist to spread across the world. The problem with this is that in the eyes of Magneto, the Terrigen Mist kill mutants. And so where the Terrigen Mist bring life to the Inhumans, it brings death to the mutants. And so again, Magneto is really one of these guys where he's like, look, I wouldn't go as far as to say that I'm willing to wage war against the Inhumans in a direct sense. We'll do that if it comes to it. But right now, it's just a matter of keeping mutants safe. But for Storm, we should only worry about keeping them safe. We do not need to go to war with the Inhumans. Now, Storm is playing a very diplomatic role here. And in truth, if I were to be honest, Storm's also just kind of walking the line and she's trying to play both sides, is really what her character is doing at this moment, in the sense of how she's being written, both, by Jeff Lemire in the main Extraordinary X-Men series, as well as, Colin Bunn in this series, that she's effectively trying to play both sides. She's trying to rally the forces of the Inhumans so they don't go to war against the mutants, but she's also trying to corral Magneto back in so he doesn't end up out in left field waging war against the Inhumans. And so it's not really the worst thing, it's just really one of these situations where she's trying to effectively keep the world together. Now, this is also the first time that Magneto himself is learning about Ulysses. Ulysses has been a character that's come up before, but Monet St. Croix even goes as far as to ask the question, who is Ulysses? Now, we are given an explanation in terms of who Ulysses is, in the sense that he's an Inhuman who was exposed to the mist and had the ability to determine what the future was going to be using mathematical probability, meaning that it's not an absolute guarantee. He doesn't see the guaranteed future. But somebody I also want to talk about here is Monet St. Croix, because to be honest, unless you've been reading Marvel Comics and the X-Men for quite some time, you probably don't know who she is. You're just probably like, who is Monet St. Croix? So Monet St. Croix really dates back to the late 80s, most likely the early 90s in Marvel Comics, and it was really Marvel just trying to tap into Generation X, the young kids in the early 90s demographic, and it really worked with the Generation X title. It was one of Marvel's most successful titles at the time. It ran for 100-something issues. But Monet St. Croix was originally a girl who was basically kind of whisked off to another dimension by circumstance, and that led to her two younger sisters, I think it was Claudette and Nicole, merging into a singular person and operating as Monet St. Croix. This was eventually retconned by Marvel when they essentially, had Monet St. Croix come back, and then her sisters split apart, and then Monet basically took on her namesake and became a superhero going forward. The problem with this is that really after the 1990s, after the disbanding of Generation X, because Monet St. Croix almost never crossed over with anybody else, with the exception of the various X-Men titles, and because the X-Men titles were just dropping in popularity after Chris Claremont and Jim Lee left in the early 1990s, I think it was, it resulted in the fact that no one really cared about Monet St. Croix anymore. No one really cared about what her character was about, where she was going, what she was doing. And so because of this, she popped up a few times, over the course of Marvel Comics, but she was always in the background. She was never like a mainstay. It was never like, Monet was on the same level as Jean Grey or Rogue or any of those. It was just kind of this enigmatic character in the background that no one ever really gave a second thought about. And so because of this, one of the really cool things
How about this?
Okay, let's reach back
Let's
to
see
this legacy.
what we got to eat. We on live, baby. YouTube, that is. Not Facebook or Twitter. Not Twitter or Instagram. Let's see what we got. We got nothing in this bitch. I'm gonna eat some of this stuff. We got some weed. We got some blunts.